Okay, in this video we're going to be looking at aggregate supply policy. So policies designed to push out our supply potential. So the aim of aggregate supply policies is to boost the overall supply potential of an economy. So what they're trying to do is generally find ways to boost our productivity or reduce firms' costs of production. And the idea of these policies is to increase our aggregate supply or shift the supply curve to the right, which will allow for economic growth and also lead to lower inflationary pressures. It allows the two of them to occur side by side or synonymously, with the idea being that because you've got increased aggregate supply, it should lead to surpluses in the economy and therefore allow businesses to lower their prices as well as lead to increases in real GDP. And the good thing about these policies is they lead to an increase in our competitiveness, so they create more jobs through the fact we have lower prices. So that leads to increased consumption, investment spending and aggregate demand, but not a shift in aggregate demand. These things are all occurring because of the lower prices, which is leading to more demand for Australian goods and services. So the idea of these policies is to shift the supply curve outwards. So from the one on the left to the right, so these ones are going the wrong way, but assume this is aggregate supply 2. We're shifting it further to the right, and that allows for increased national income. So our national income or real GDP, which is the x-axis, increases. So we're at this point here, this line here where the cursor is right now, as with a price here, lower price, and a higher level of quantity of output. So this is basically done by increasing our productive capacity, or which will allow us to meet the needs of a growing population. So what are meant by aggregate supply side policies? Aggregate supply policies are any government initiative, so policies implemented by the government, designed to reduce the cost of production for businesses and improve supply side conditions for businesses, with the intent of boosting our overall productive capacity and living standards. The aim of these policies is generally to boost productivity and our international competitiveness and eliminate any what we call capacity constraints, which is like when we don't have enough supply to meet demand. So like bottlenecks or traffic jams and all issues where we don't have enough supply to meet a growing level of demand. So the idea is to push aggregate supply out like this curve does here, so that we end up with GDP here with increased sustainable rates of economic growth, so increased growth without causing inflation. Because if we're just increasing aggregate demand, we might get increased growth, but we're also going to get higher prices. And eventually, increasing aggregate demand is not very useful because we don't have the resources to sustain that level of demand. So boosting our aggregate supply, our productive capacity, is the key way in which we achieve growth, but also achieve lower prices. Okay, it can also be referred to as increasing our productive capacity or our overall ability to supply. And if we're able to do that, so assuming that this blue line represents like the business cycle, we're able to meet that increase in demand that's occurring with aggregate supply, and therefore we should be able to grow faster each year without causing inflationary pressures. So a shift in aggregate supply increases our productive capacity, and it's generally caused by better quality or quantity of resources, and it leads to higher GDP at lower prices. The whole point of shifting aggregate supply is to ensure there's enough resources to meet demand without inflationary pressures. And most countries that are growing at 10-15% per year are doing so not because they're just stimulating demand for their goods and services, but also increasing their ability to supply through infrastructure spending, education, workplace reforms, which we'll talk about, to try and encourage productivity so we can meet that demand with extra supply. Shifting aggregate supply to the right doesn't cause the demand curve to shift. It causes an expansion in demand because of the lower prices, which still helps to increase our real GDP. So we end up at this point where we're here, we've got increased demand or an expansion along this blue curve, which is being caused by the lower prices. Demand does not shift. Aggregate supply shift to the left is bad because it leads to higher prices and reduced output, and it can be caused by emigration, so people leaving Australia, or natural disasters. Some ways we can boost our aggregate supply potential we'll talk about more going forward. But when you're looking at supply side policies, the key things to recognise is that generally policies that are going to do one of three things. They will either boost population, so increase the amount of births, or immigration will increase population. Ways to boost participation, which can include subsidies for childcare or increasing the pension age, etc. Or policies that will boost productivity and lower cost of production. They're the three main ways in which we boost our supply potential. Okay, so here's an example of budgetary supply side policies. So infrastructure spending increases the quality of our resources and allows us to supply more without inflation, so we don't have traffic jams and we have lower petrol costs because there's less time spent in traffic. Childcare subsidies, so parents will go back to work, which boosts participation. Increasing the pension age boosts participation. Education spending helps to increase the skills of our workforce. Lower income and company taxes. Lower income taxes boost participation, and lower company taxes help to stimulate investment. Baby bonuses in the long term, once the babies grow up, they'll join the workforce. Cutting welfare to those not in the workforce will encourage them to join the workforce and therefore more supply. And any other measures to try and get unemployed people employed will also help as well. So the aim of these policies is designed to essentially lower costs of production and keep prices down and also boost growth. These policies, in combination with the mining boom, were really important for boosting our material living standards. But with the end of the mining boom in recent years, it's now even more important that we're using supply-side policies. Thank you.